Have you ever been in a situation where someone in your band or your worship team basically calls you up and says they're either sick or can't make it to that next performance or the next Sunday service? What do you do? Well, in today's video, I want to show you how you can start out by creating your own multi-tracks or your own stem tracks to supplement for people that are missing on stage. Today, I'm actually going to be recording the bass guitar and a worship pad track that will be used on Sunday. I'm going to be filling in for our drummer. So on the drums, I'm basically going to cue each of these files so that as if our bass player was actually going to be there, we would have bass guitar coming out. Now, bass guitar and pad are two that you could probably get away with as long as you got enough people on stage where it looks pretty full. If you're trying to supplement a drummer or even an acoustic guitar, those things are a little bit more noticeable in the mix. But I'm gonna get you started today with Studio One. You don't have to use Studio One. This thing can work for GarageBand or Logic. No matter what your digital audio workstation is, you can record your own tracks and then use them in your worship service as well. The most important thing is that with each of these tracks that we're recording, they need to have a consistent click track and a guide track as well. Now, a guide track is basically me talking into a microphone saying things like verse 2, 3, 4. So that even while I'm playing drums, I know where we're at in relation to the rest of the mix. If this content is interesting to you, I want to encourage you to hit the subscribe button for more content just like this. Now let's get started creating our own custom multi-tracks. All right, so the first thing that we need to do is open up a session. So I'm going to open up Studio One. Studio One is a digital audio workstation. Basically what that means, if you're familiar with Pro Tools or GarageBand, or Logic, a digital audio workstation is basically like those old cassette recorders. We're able to input audio to record a performance, and then we can export that performance either in stems or we can export it to an MP3, however you see fit. So once Studio One boots up, the first thing I want to do is make sure that in the setup window, I've got my universal audio interface selected. It's at 48 kilohertz. I'm going to go over to New and create a new song. I'm going to call this King of Kings. I'm going to make sure that it is installed to the right directory. The directory that I'm using is my SSD external drive here. I'm just going to create a new folder and call it Worship Stems. And then in my Worship Stems folder, there'll be a folder called King of Kings. With that being selected, hit OK. Brings us to a fresh session on Studio One. So the first thing we need to do is actually drag in King of Kings. Now for this video's sake, I'll be wearing headphones. Of course, if you've got some sort of headphones that you can be using, if you're gonna be recording guide tracks and things like that, now would be the time to grab them. These are just a pair of open back Shure SRH 1840s. These are great for mixing. You will be able to hear some of the stuff coming out of the outside of the headphones. These are not closed back. But for the rest of the video, I'll keep these on. You make sure you've got some sort of monitoring set up as well. First thing I want to say is that whatever song you intend to do, you need to know what key you're going to be doing the song in. This song, King of Kings, is in the key of D major. We're actually going to be performing the song in the same key, D major, so it makes it real easy if I just drag and drop an MP3 of the song King of Kings directly into Studio One. As soon as I drag and drop in there, it's going to show me the entire song laid out. Now I can go through and create a guide track. If you're going to be doing the song in a different key, but the arrangement is going to be the exact same, you can still drag and drop the MP3 in there, because when you're doing the guide track doesn't actually have to have any sort of notes to it. It's just going to be a click track and me talking. One thing I'll do just to save some time is I'll go to Google and I'll type in the name of the song, King of Kings, and I'll put BPM, and that's basically telling me what's the beats per minute, or most likely beats per minute, to the song. It says this one's about 68 beats per minute, and looking just down the list, it's like Multitracks has also got it at 68. So I'm gonna go back into Studio One, and at the bottom right, I can actually see that tempo is already mapped out at 68. Pretty cool. If you need to change the tempo, just click down here, type in your number value, hit enter, 68. Now the grid is set to 68 beats per minute, but I don't know that the song is necessarily on it. I'm going to go to this section over here where it's got some major stuff happening. And I'm going to try and line up the track so that it's right on the downbeat. Let's take a listen. Before I hit play, I know this is going to blow things up. I'm going to decrease the volume of this track. I'm going to type in -16 because it's going to be pretty loud, I imagine. Okay, now we've got the tempo set at 68 beats per minute. I've got King of Kings. I've nudged the track around. If you have trouble and it's locking into the grid every time you're trying to move the file, if you hold the shift button down and then click and drag the track, the shift button should unlock it from the grid so you can really get it specifically where that downbeat is. All right, next thing I want to do on Studio One, they have this thing called the arrangement view. So I'm going to turn this info view off. I want to open up this tab that says Arranger. Now with the Arranger, I can go in here and double click and I can put in just a little tab that lets me know where we're at in the song. Since the song is at 68 beats per minute, I'm going to have all of the audio begin at the third measure. So I'm going to click and drag this track, move it to the third measure here, and then on the Arranger tab, I'm going to double click on the third measure, and as you can see, it starts off with intro. Then I can take this slider and I can move it around however long the intro needs to be. So I'm going to go through now and just label each part of this arrangement on the Arranger tab. You just double click, and then on the info viewer, you can go in and rename each of the tabs, whatever they need to be titled. Okay, so as you can see now on the screen, I have on the arrangement view, I've just got notation letting me know where I'm at in the song. This is going to make it a lot easier for me as I'm recording bass. I can just look at the screen and I'm not looking at a bunch of waves. I'm looking at intro, verse, chorus, verse 2, chorus 2, verse 3, verse 4, chorus 3, tag. And over here on the left, if you click this button that's the I believe it's like the info view, click I, and then you can double click any of these tabs. It'll let you rename them as needed. You can also change the colors and stuff if you're interested in doing that kind of thing. Now it's actually time to plug in a microphone and record some stuff. We need a guide track first. So what I'm going to do is grab a microphone. I'm just using an SM57 and a microphone cable. Doesn't have to be anything fancy at all. You could probably even use your phone. Test 1 2, test test test. Okay. I do have a signal coming through to the microphone. You can probably hear this as well. I'm just going to hold the microphone, and what I'm doing is I've got the click track going in my ears. If you don't have the click track enabled, you can hit the C key on your keyboard. That'll turn the click track on and off. Should be hearing a little click sound. First thing I need to do is add a track, so I'm going to hit the plus button, and then I'm going to call this one Guide. It's an audio track, and it's on input 2. Hit OK. I'm going to record enable. Now basically everything that I'm saying through the microphone is going to be picked up by the computer. I'm going to go to the very beginning, and what I need to do is I need to count in what's coming up next. So one measure before whatever the next part in the arrangement is, I'm going to say intro 2 3 4, and then the intro starts. You kind of see how that goes. Intro 2 3 4. What I can do just for copyright reasons, so I don't get flagged for this by Hillsong United, I'm going to mute the guide. I'm going to mute the MP3 of King of Kings, and that way you can hear me as I'm talking it in. I'm just listening to the click track, and I'm going to count in the verse and the choruses as well. All right, so here's coming into the verse. Verse 2 3 4. Evidently in this song there's some measures that only have 2 beats in them, so make sure you account for that. I still need to go one measure out from when the chorus begins and count in from there. Chorus, 2, 3, 4. All right, so now you can see in the purple tracks, these are each of my guide tracks right here. Why do we have a guide? Well, we have a guide because I'm gonna be the only one as the drummer. I'm gonna be the only one hearing the click track. I'm gonna be the only one hearing the arrangement. So the worship leader, the singer, the pianist, they need to know when stuff's happening. So in my ears, I'm gonna hear myself saying verse, 2, 3, 4. And on the drums, there are ways that I can indicate to the rest of the team, hey, we got a different part in the arrangement coming up. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to select all of these purple tracks together. I'm going to hit Control B. What that does is it bounces it all into one audio track. And then I'm going to level adjust. So I probably recorded this a little quiet. Let me look at the metering here. Chorus, 2, 3, 4. Not too bad. I'm going to bring this up just a little bit. If you select the square chiclet, you can clip gain this just to bring up the volume. Now what I need is to actually export the metronome. Okay, so the click that we've been hearing, or the click that I've been hearing in my headphones, I need that to be an actual audio track. So I'm going to select everywhere I want there to be a click track. I'm going to go down here to metronome, render loop range. So now I can actually turn off the metronome because I have a click track literally on its own track. So let's listen to those together. Intro, 2, 3, 4. Okay, now we need 2 more tracks. We need a bass guitar track and we need a pad track. Let me grab my bass guitar. Okay, I'm going to create a new track. I'm going to call it bass. This one is going into input 1. I'm going to record enable. Studio One's got a tuner built into it. I've just got my bass guitar. The guitar cable is going from here into my interface, just going direct. If you have a direct box and you want to use that, that's fine. These Apollo interfaces, they just have an input that's high Z or high impedance right on the front. Studio One, I'm going to open up a tuner. I do have a tuner here, but I guess I'm just being lazy. Let's see what they have on this. For the purposes of this video, I'm not going to get into the mixing side of the bass guitar and stuff like that. We'll have videos on that in the future, so you can hit the subscribe button. But for now, I'm just going to play through the song. I've got a chord chart available, so I can play along with the track as well. And let's see what happens. Intro, 2, 3, 4. All right, not bad. There was one little spot, I had a little blip, but I'm not going to go back and re-record because one of the things about these multi-tracks that I like is what I want it to be is as if it were a live performance on every Sunday. Now, if I just egregiously missed an entire note, that's fine. But if I hit a fret or I got a little bit of a buzz, it's totally fine. I'm going to leave that like it is. So there's my bass track. Now it's time to record some pad. Just off camera, I've got this M Audio 2-octave keyboard. It's a USB setup. If you have a MIDI keyboard, that's fine as well. All right, one of the things I needed to do was I went up to Studio One, Preferences, and over on External Devices, I didn't have the Oxygen set up, so I needed to go to Add. Then I went to New Keyboard. From New Keyboard, the manufacturer was M Audio, Oxygen, Receive From, and then from the drop-down list, I can see Oxygen 25 on there. For the most of the time, I was using the Privia, which is a lot larger. It's a weighted keyboard. I wanted something smaller to go on my desk, so I brought back in the Oxygen. Now I'm going to go to Add a New Track and select MIDI Instrument. I can name it Pad. It's going to input from the Oxygen keyboard. I'm going to select PreSonus VST they have. It's called Presence. It's usually a pretty good one. On the track side, if you select the keyboard picture, if you click that, it'll open up the VST or the virtual instrument. Here we have Presence. On the drop down from the presets, I'm just going to go through here and try to find something maybe in the strings. Let's see if I can find a worshipful sounding pad to use. Intro, 2, 3, 4. All right, so the pad track is meant to be super boring. So if you want to go through and make this more advanced, you can definitely play through the chords if you want. For me, I'm usually looking for this kind of sound out of the pad where it's an octave of whatever key we're in and maybe the fifth is thrown in. Let's sustain that as long as possible, because you can hear the electric guitars, they're doing some swimmy stuff really high up on the guitar neck, but it's got all this ambience to it. So what I did, I went in with Presence. I found one called Big Pad, and it was under the Artist Instruments folder. Then go into Synths. There's one called Big Pad. I turned on this filter to roll off all the high end. I added a bunch of reverb, and then I used an EQ to take off all the low end. The more low end information you can take out of your pads, the more they're going to be able to sit in the mix better, especially since I've got a bass guitar and drums going. I don't need a giant synthesizer getting in the way. So I went in and double clicked the MIDI track. You can select these MIDI notes and you can drag them out as far as you want. So I don't have to sit there for the entire song and hold that key. As long as that's going to be the notes I'm playing, I just dragged it out to the length of the song. I'm going to select the audio track. I'm going to hit Command B. That's going to bounce it into an audio track. I don't want it to be just MIDI. I want it to be actual audio. So now it's going to render the MIDI instrument as if it's a performed audio track. Okay, I need to clip gain this. I'm going to listen to it in context with the bass guitar. Just the bass guitar and the pad. Let's listen to those together and see if I can get a good balance of the two. Okay, I like that balance pretty well. The bass guitar needs to be tuned. This is something I've gotten pretty used to doing with this Austin P bass. It is a pawn shop bass, but I can slap auto tune on this bass guitar and let it do its thing. So auto tune is going to take it and just nudge it into the places that it needs to go. Okay, now I've got the bass and the pad tracks where I want them to be. Here's a very important part. Now we need to export these as stems. So the way that I'm going to do that is I'm going to mute this King of Kings audio. I'm gonna go up here. Studio One has a song tab. Then I'm gonna go to export stems. Stems is gonna give me one file for each. I wanna make sure my guide track is selected, my click track is selected, bass guitar, and pad. I don't need the MIDI instrument exported. I just need the audio that was rendered from that. So the file prefix name is King of Kings. I've got it going to my Studio One external SSD. It's a WAV file. Between the loop, I need to make sure I'm covering all the ground here. All right, export stems between the loop. I'm gonna hit OK. From here, you want to take these 4 audio files and make sure that you've got them exporting the same way you would from multitracks.com. Whether you use Ableton Live, whatever software or hardware you use to cue tracks during worship, just make sure your click track and your guide track are going to the same channel. And then stuff like your bass and your pad, those either need to go to separate channels, or simple setup, you can use the headphone out on your laptop, assuming it still has that function. Use the headphone out to split left and right. Have your click and your guide going to the left channel, have your bass and your pad going to the right channel. That will give you 2 channels to use with your in-ear monitors as you wish. Thank you so much for watching. My name is Chris Green. Hit the subscribe button if you made it this far, and I'll see you next time. All right, bye. Intro, 2, 3, 4. Verse, 2, 3, 4. chorus, 2, 3, 4.